Welcome to Stepping into Life. I'm your host, David Hoke, and I'm here today with one of our co-hosts, Suzanne Blackwood, a therapist here with Family Counseling Centers. And today we have back a guest we just loved the last time he was with us, Ben Jones with Tulip Recovery. And Suzanne, I know you're going to kind of take Ben down the road of a more clinical approach to this and some of those things. So I'm going to let you just take it away.
Sure. And something I've noticed in my time as a clinician is the pattern of flight when faced with threatening situations or a perceived threat. And with clients, our primitive response is fight or flight. And so often what I see with clients in their therapy sessions is a pattern of flight responses. Sometimes we see that with dissociation. If they can't physically escape a situation, they escape in their minds. We see it with suicidal ideation. They want a way out, away from their troubles. And sometimes it's panic. They just deal with panic and they're afraid, they're fearful because they think, I can't handle this. This is too much for me. And I think substance abuse is another flight response. And one thing that concerns me is sometimes the lack of family support. And I did part of my internship with the drug and alcohol recovery program. And what really broke my heart is, especially with the adolescents who were in the program, I remember one girl was just wanting her mom to come on family night to be there to support her. And then she shared with me, well, my mom isn't coming. She has a date with her boyfriend. That just broke my heart. I'm like, and then I would often see that, especially with the young clients, the adolescent clients, that they would go home and their mom would be smoking pot, their dad would be smoking pot or taking pain pills or whatever it may be, meth, or an aunt or an uncle or their cousins. And it's like, how can they succeed in recovery when they go home and they're around it? The adults in their lives are using. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? How do you tackle that?
Well, it is a very, very difficult situation. And what I'll say is there needs to be a separation. And a definite separation needs to take place in that circumstance as far as that individual going to treatment to get away. And with adults, it's building a life of self-sufficiency to where we're not going to have to rely on anyone, and we can build this life up and what we need. And so when we do family therapy, we are educating and trying to make an educated decision based off family history, dynamics, who's conducive for our clients' recovery and treatment and life. And so we will do that education to the family and talk to them about what's going on and maybe some things that they can do. But if it's not conducive for the client that we're treating, then we're looking at really pushing and having that client strive to have a job and be able to take care of themselves by the time they complete treatment. In a situation where there's no support and things like that, we have to find support. We're human beings. That's something that we need, and the fellowship, and we can find that a number of ways. But it's so important for recovery.
Well, I can't help but think that clients might have the courage to face their problems without that flight response of turning to a substance if they had family support. On the other extreme, I had a client who was talked about how loving his parents were and how supportive, and how he didn't know how he could have made it through his recovery without their help. And so I guess in some situations, family can be a great support in the person's recovery, but in other times, family members may actually cause more harm than good. But there are other supports you could look at, other forms of family, so to speak, maybe friends, or if there aren't any healthy friends, then maybe the recovery community itself becomes kind of the person's family.
Absolutely. And I've seen that for a lot of individuals. And the flight response of and coping skill and everything of using and drinking to feel better is, that's what we do. That's what we deal with and see on a daily basis. And the family dynamic, a healthier family dynamic, and a family that is conducive to that, our client's recovery, we're seeing 70-80% better outcomes when they're involved. If they have proper education on substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, and what that entails, which is why we strive to have them involved throughout the process. It's so important if they're conducive, and that's a big if, because if they're not, you're right, there's going to be more harm caused. And really that wormhole of addiction just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's something that we're trying to prevent and help draw a line there.
Mm-hmm. And even in the best case scenario, when someone does have that support system, still we're human. We may want to support our loved one, but no one can be the perfect support for someone. So how does spirituality play a role there, where you can get the patient to turn to God? And because God's there 24/7, family and friends aren't there 24/7. Maybe the recovery community is there 24/7, but still, there's having that. I know in some recovery communities they call him a higher power. I call him God. For me, he's Jesus Christ. But how do you get them to that point where they know they can call on Him and not have to constantly rely on their human support systems?
Well, and I think that's different for every client that comes through on what that looks like, as far as where they are in that spiritual process for them. I know for me personally, it came full circle, as far as being raised Southern Baptist, losing my faith for a while, and everything that I was going through and had experienced, and mostly self-imposed on myself, and I had to, and I found my excuse me, I found my higher power through the recovery community. That's how I came back around and had to make that decision. And I think for a lot of individuals, that's a good place to start, and being able to see the way that a higher power has worked in other people's lives, and that can open a door, and a glimpse of hope and a glimpse of light, and just seeing how people rally around other people. To me, that's my higher power working in the world, in other people's lives, is that right there of seeing the good in people and that we can be happy.
Is there, have you noticed, does there seem to be kind of a natural progression in a person's spiritual journey when they're going through drug and alcohol treatment? Even without the influence of the recovery community.
Yes. I think there's a natural progression of every aspect. So we're seeing there's a physical, mental, spiritual, everyone's usually broken in those three regards when they come into treatment or recovery in general. But I think it depends on what the individual or client is willing to do, and willing to explore, and maybe who they're working with. we're talking to about past experiences. I think the biggest thing and the most important thing that any of us can do is open a door for another individual. I think a person that's close to me told me one day, all we can do is plant seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Water those seeds, hope that they grow, and keep checking in on them.
Mm-hmm.
And that resonates with me. And that's something that I think, will it happen organically? It can. Does that mean that we stop planting those seeds? No.
And I guess it's a fine line between having the person take ownership and be accountable for his or her decisions and behaviors, but also recognize that he or she can't do it all on his or her own. And it's okay to ask for help, which is pretty much step one of the 12 steps, is recognizing you can't do it on your own. And I had a client who struggled with that because he felt like he needed to take full ownership of his decisions, which yes, that's true, but he had trouble with that part of having to rely on God for help because he felt like he should be able to do it all on his own, by himself. And so that must be a hard balance sometimes to strike.
It can be very difficult. I mean, just asking for help in general from your higher power, God, or from other people. I mean, it's not something that I was really accustomed to going into the recovery process for myself, and it became kind of a learned skill. I had to be forced into it, and forced into asking people for help, and that's something that I wasn't comfortable with. But growth happens in uncomfortable situations when we're willing to push through and do things that maybe we're not accustomed to doing, and things that make us feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I imagine that for a lot of people that may have been a problem all along, which led to addiction, is they didn't know how to ask for help, or they were unwilling to ask for help, and they tried to do it on their own and couldn't.
Yeah, and that's a big piece of when we take a look at ego and how ego can get in the way of just people that aren't in addiction. I mean, and people that do struggle with addiction and people that don't. I mean, ego can become a barrier to happiness. And trying to be humble and show humility throughout your life, and by working, with other people and talking to other people, and remembering that, we're all just people trying to do the best we can, live our lives, and be happy.
Wow, I admire the work you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I admire you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. Absolutely.
Well, it's a calling, and I imagine the same for you, and it's an honor
Yes, ma'am.
to get to be a part of people's lives as they go through this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you.
So I've got just a quick question maybe to kind of bring us toward a close here. And again, Ben, we appreciate the insights you share with us, particularly as it relates to how the family fits into this, because as we've said, and I don't know if we said it in this particular show or not, but sometimes you can have the family wanting to help and actually maybe not being the help they think they are being, wanting to, or the other side, not having the interest and really needing to get them engaged in some way. Any tips or insights into how we get the family in the right place to really help?
Yes, I mean, and I'll be honest, a lot of families are resistant to these recommendations, but I would say Al-Anon is a good option of being able to go and hear from other families and what other families have experienced with their loved ones, spouses, in addiction, as well as family counseling. I mean, it's a very good option, and it's a good way to identify, the family system, what that looks like, and what's taking place in that dynamic, to where at least that's a starting point.
Because I guess you mentioned maybe the last time we were together, sometimes the family thinks they're the cause, or looking to bring their own relief or release in the situation as well. And other times, maybe they are a heavy influence or a factor in what's brought the addiction on, or the other mental health issues we mentioned, and yet they're sign of the loss. They're either blaming themselves, and they probably have little to blame, or they're saying, "Well, I've got nothing to do with this." Is that typical? Or?
It is. I mean, a lot of times, families blame themselves. I have a feeling. Well, I know that my family, my parents, went back and took a look at maybe like what I do here, like what led him down this direction, and I had to go back and explain like this was something that.
That you chose to do, I guess.
It was, and something that was part of my journey, and that I ventured out and made that choice and that decision, and I mean, they raised me the same as they raised my brother and sister, and I realize that, and they do as well. But also, families sometimes think that they can be the solution to the problem as well, and they want to step in and fix everything. Something else that's important to know is that's not how it works either. I mean, stepping in and just fixing all the problems and taking care of everything, there's an accountability factor for the individual and family member that has made some of the choices that they made, and that's where a counselor can really help out in identifying and showing what those are and where the boundaries should be set between certain family members.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I hear so often from Suzanne and Dave as we talk, and maybe more off camera than on, and probably a great show for us just to talk about boundaries in the future.
Oh yes, there's a huge risk of codependency among family members. Sometimes family members contribute to the problem because of tumultuous relationships. Well, that's the obvious, but sometimes it's more subtle. They think they're helping their loved one, but what they're doing is trying to rescue their loved one again and again and again. They cover for the loved one's behavior instead of assertively confronting it. And what ends up happening, they think they're doing it out of love, but over time, they end up neglecting themselves, wearing themselves out, and enabling the loved one with the addiction. And meanwhile, the family members who are doing this, likely resentment is building. And over time, that leads to bitterness. And that is not a healthy relationship.
Great. Well, as you tune in and listen to us today, we've been visiting with Ben Jones of the Tulip Recovery. And Suzanne, why don't we ask Ben just to let our listeners at home know how to get in touch if they have questions directly for you.
Absolutely. So go to tuliphillrecovery.com. You can click the Contact Now button, and that'll take you to our admissions line and reach out, and we'll be happy to help you any way we can.
Great. Suzanne, anything else to add?
Yes, you mentioned Al-Anon. Also, another great group is Celebrate Recovery, which is Christian-based and 12-step based. And they have small share groups that also deal with codependency, so family members can participate as well as the ones who struggle with addictions.
Great. Well, you've tuned in to Step Into Life, and today we've been talking about just ways to handle and deal with addiction, and program that Ben's Recovery, Tulip Hill Recovery, I'll get that right, Tulip Hill Recovery offers to people in Middle Tennessee. We hope you'll take time to go back, maybe re-listen if you tuned in midway through the show, and tune in next time when we find a topic of the day. Maybe it'll be boundaries, who knows? And we're here just to share and to open your heart and your life to the life itself. So on behalf of Suzanne, David is not with us today. I'm David Hope, saying we'll keep praying for one another, praying for recovery in our country. Take care.